Hello, this is Kimberly Rowland at the University of Alaska Fairbanks for the Unit 15 Screencast Weather and Climate of Alaska, but for this unit we're specifically looking at Kotzebue. This is a graph showing the surface air temperature in Kotzebue for January, the last week in January actually. This line, this dashed line with the white circles, is the maximum average for their climate there, so their actual year-to-year climate, which is gathered over 30-year periods. This is the maximum, this is the mean, and this is the minimum, and this is actually the day-to-day variability for the last week of January in 2013. And here to start off the week, it was pretty steady, stayed around the average. And then here it took off, got a little high, and then it dropped severely within not even 24 hours, like a 6-hour period from here to here. Actually, I'm sorry, 12-hour period. Just dropped, and came rapidly back up again. And we'll be looking at some TV maps, TV weather maps later in this screencast, and I'll explain why as well. This graph is of the humidity, the relative humidity, and the dew point. So this solid blue line is the dew point, and the dashed red line is the relative humidity. And this is also for the last week of January 2013. And as you can see, the general shape of the graph, it stays true to the temperature graph. Obviously, as weather is warmer, the relative humidity is actually lower because it's very dry in the interior. So warmer air can hold more moisture, so it makes sense that it's warmer air, the relative humidity of the actual moisture in the air would go down because there's not as much moisture to be had. But as the temperature dropped and got cold, the relative humidity went up because as cold air cannot hold as much moisture as warm air. The little moisture there was available would take up a higher percentage. But here the dew point actually dropped rather rapidly, and the dew point is the temperature at which the available water vapor in the air would condensate out. This graph is of the, actually, you know what, we're going to move on and we're going to look at the TV weather maps, and we're going to come back to this because this is for March and we don't want to look at those right now. So pardon me while I find the weather maps. So this is the TV weather map for Monday, January 28th, 2013. And this little gold star here is Kotzebue, so you kind of know where it is. So you can see there's cloud cover over this area, and there's several highs all around here, having a big effect, even though they're kind of, in proportion to Alaska, kind of far away because the state's huge. And there's some lows down here with the prevailing winds trying to bring the clouds up through the Gulf and around, circulate around this Aleutian low here. And so this cloud cover is associated with the warmer, more steady temperatures in the beginning of the week. And then when the temperature shoots up toward Thursday, and then begins to drop off rapidly at the end of Thursday evening. As you can see, this low has been pulled up through these winds coming up through the Gulf to over Kotzebue, which is right here. And there's less cloud cover now. And usually, generally in Alaska, in the wintertime, less clouds means colder temperatures because there's less clouds to cover the atmosphere and trap heat from radiating back out from the earth. So this makes sense. This is where the temperature just dropped incredibly. Yeah. And then it started to come back up, and as you can see, this winds coming up is influenced by this Aleutian low out here. It's pulling the clouds back up over Kotzebue and influencing that, bringing up to warmer temperatures. warming it back up again. Alright, now we're going to move on to looking at the temperature for March. So this is the same graph, or same type of graph as before. It's the temperature. This the average temperature climate-wise. This is the mean, once again, the maximum and the minimum, and this is the day-to-day daily temperatures for the week of March. Looks like one of the later weeks in March. One of the reasons for these big daily spikes is we're getting closer and closer to the, I believe it's the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, where the sun is starting to get, come up over the horizon and come back to us here in the north. And because of that, the sun's having much more of a warming effect now. So when these daily spikes you're seeing is like during the day, the sun comes up here. This is time here down at the bottom. And as the sun comes up, I mean, it's cold in the morning, but then in the afternoon, as the sun like really begins to have an effect, the temperatures shoot up. And then as the sun goes down, the land, which is still frigid and cold and being held by the snow, drops rapidly again. And then it climbs back up again during the day when the sun comes up, then drops back down. And the temperature here is pretty steady. It's colder than normal, which is odd, but we'll get to that later. And then it warms really rapidly, really nice for people in Kotzebue. At the end of March, it's up to 15 above here at the end. This is a graph of the humidity and dew point temperature. Once again, blue line, dew point, red dashed line, humidity. And as you can see, it follows right along with the way the temperature was going. Very consistent. And now we're going to move to the TV weather maps for March. Oops, I'm sorry, wrong map. Here we go. So this is Friday, March 22nd, 2003. First of the 3 TV weather maps for Kotzebue for the spring. As you can see, there's a low centered here in the middle of the state. Again, circulating air. The winds in Alaska, because of this Aleutian low out here, tend to move this way in a broad, big, huge circular pattern. Although on a local scale, obviously, the wind could be blowing any direction. But as a general rule, the winds tend to come up through the Gulf, bringing all this heavy, dense, moisture-rich air up and dumping it on the Alaska Range and the Chugach here, and then it circulates back down this way and around and around and around we go. As you can tell, the colder, so in the spring, let me back up. In the winter, as I was explained before, the cloud cover is usually associated with warmer temperatures because it traps heat that's been radiated off the Earth in the atmosphere and warms it. And clear skies is associated with cold because the sun is at such a low angle that it's not having, the solar radiation is not having much of an effect. And the warm air that's radiating off the Earth, it just escapes into the atmosphere. So in the wintertime, clear skies, cold, cloudy skies, warm. In the springtime, however, the sun is starting to have an effect and the angle is not so steep anymore. So in the spring, cloudy skies, cold, warm, clear skies, warm, because the sun is now beginning to warm the Earth, which is really cool, which is what we want, which is not happening this year, unfortunately. Or at least winter's trying to pretend that spring doesn't happen here, but hopefully they'll get their act together and figure that out. So here, the colder the normal temperatures, you can see is the cloudiness being brought up from the Gulf. Anyway, so the next day, Monday, March 25th, 2003, temperatures are still cold, if we recall looking back at our graph of the daily temperatures, and you can see here still thickly covered with clouds, these big lows here, though there's some highs over here over Russia, kind of the two are kind of pulling on each other, probably affecting Kotzebue. Then when the temperature really skyrocketed, you see this low here, and the state has started to clear off. It's clear here, which means the sun can have more effect, which is why the temperature shot up the way it did in the end. To finish up this screencast, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the meteorological occurrences that had such an effect on March being colder than usual. And I would say that has to do with, just as you can see in this thing, the winds bringing these big clouds and storm masses up and all this moisture-rich air to dump on the Alaska range. And since it's spring, starting to create a rain shadow back here, and Kotzebue is out of that. So, anyway, I said that wrong. I'm sorry. Just scratch that part. The reason Kotzebue is having colder than normal temperatures is because of the cloud cover, which was because of the weather being brought up from the Gulf, from the prevailing winds. But this is the wrong map to be showing you, and that's why I got mixed up. The more accurate, I would say, the weather out of all of the climate we looked at for Kotzebue, I have to say is probably January. Well, I don't know, because it was pretty variable. There was a big huge spike in there, but at least at the beginning of the week, it was more typical of and a better representation of what actually goes on in Kotzebue. Anyway, thanks. I'd like to say thanks to everybody for watching or listening to my screencasts, even though some of them I'm sure aren't the best, and I apologize for some of the errors I made looking at the wrong map, starting to go off on basically explaining the wrong map to you. I apologize for that. Anyway, thank you, and I hope everyone has a wonderful summer if it ever gets here. Goodbye.